today's Health Chronicles, we focus on the story of a gentleman by name Jeremiah. Jeremiah is worn out. The pressure at work keeps mounting. Pre-COVID, the FMCG conglomerate he was working for hailed him for being the best sales manager within the Sub-Saharan Africa region. He, together with his team, consistently met sales targets year after year. Then COVID hit. Sales started dropping. Sales team became demoralized. Expectation from his senior managers started growing. Disappointment started rearing its head. Morning alarms set his heart racing as pressure mounted with each passing hour. He didn't look forward to opening his inbox as he was sure to read piles of emails about non-achievement of targets. Gradually, anxiety set in. He's sleeping less and has lost his appetite for food, which has led to some weight loss. He reported to the hospital recently with severe migraine, and his visit revealed that he has chronic stress. To help me discuss Jeremiah's issue is Dr. Byrite Asamoah, the Chief Medical Officer of SYNLAB Ghana. Dr. Asamoah, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Julius.
Right. So let's just zoom into it. What is stress?
Stress, I'm sure everybody feels stress. Everybody is really shaken by the thought of stress, but stress really is something that affects everybody. It affects everybody to varying degrees based on how you perceive it and how you handle it, okay? But then to define stress, it's really a natural response of the body to anything that it perceives to be a threat or a challenge. Okay. So it could be something that is actually real or something that is imagined. But then it's the body responding to that stressor, trying to find a way to handle it, okay? Now, you could find stress to be, within some people, very well managed. In other people, or depending on the nature of the stress and the duration of the stress, it really affects persons to a certain degree that begins to affect their health. So stress is really the body's natural response to a stressor or to any situation that they deem a threat.
Great. Wow, that's very deep. So tell us, what are some of the causes of stress?
Basically, truly the demands of life. You know, we are all faced with demands. One, waking up, coming to work, sitting in traffic can cause stress.
Right.
Paying bills can cause stress. Your wife can cause you stress. There's so many causes of stress. But to properly categorize it, you know, we look at your work. So if you have work-related problems that causes you stress, if you have deadlines to meet that's causing you a lot of stress, if you have a marriage problem, financial problems, all these things come together to cause so much stress. You could have stress related to job insecurity. You know and feel that your job is not a secure job. You're stressed by it. But the thing is that there are degrees of stress, there are types of stress. So if you have sort of, let's say, small stress, okay, for instance, you're going to write an exam, that stress helps you to prepare adequately, to be alert, and to also give your best for the exam. If you've got a job interview, it's stress. But then the way the stress is that it actually helps you to prepare for the interview and to give your best at the interview. But then again, you have stress that, as it were, persists, okay? And when stress is chronic or is there for a long time, it begins to then affect the body. So let me just explain a mechanism. So the body is wired with an alarm system in the brain. Okay, and this alarm system is more like your stress response system.
Right.
So in the case that you have anything that is the body deems a threat, the body then releases some hormones and chemicals into the body. And what these hormones and chemicals do is that they increase your heart rate, they increase your pulse. It's more like it gets you ready to fight or to flight, you know, to either run away or to fight the situation. Now, where you have a threat that elicits all these responses, once the threat is eliminated, these things subside and you return back to normal.
So from what you're saying, could we then deduce that there are positives to stress?
Indeed, so there are positives to stress. So you have let's say, a dog chasing you. You've never run so fast, but you run so fast to escape the threat. In that case, it was positive. You have an exam, like I said, it helps you really burn the midnight oil and prepare adequately for that. So these are the positives to stress. But in the case that the source of stress is not gone or it's persistent, what happens is that the chemicals that your body releases to tackle the stress remain in the system. So your body doesn't get to relax. It doesn't get to return back to normal. And the persistence of these hormones and stressing, as it were, the whole system results in factors that affect your whole body, affect your mind, and affect your behavior. Basically affecting your whole physiology as a person. And that's results in various complications of stress.
Okay. How about trauma, natural disasters? They're natural. How are they, a source of stress?
Right. So the thing about trauma, we all know that trauma is supposed to be painful. So anything that is painful, anything that is unpleasant to the body causes stress. So even sickness, if you have poor health, all this contributes to, stress. Even if it's a loved one who's unwell and the need to cater for that person causes stress. Even a mother who has a newborn baby, it's supposed to bring joy, but then you have the burden of waking up early, staying up at night, feeding the baby. It brings a whole lot of stress. So even sometimes somebody can say a new marriage can cause stress because of the demands that were not probably anticipated. So really, it's just the basic demands of life. The things that life comes with. Your ability to handle it determines whether it just has significant impact on you or at least something that is manageable.
I mean, it's very insightful what we've learned so far. But Doc, can we take a look at how stress affects the body?
Right.
Right. And shed a bit of light.
Right. So, stress truly affects the very being, the whole person. Okay. It affects you, again, like I said, it affects you from your body, physically. It affects your mind, affecting your thoughts, your emotions, and it even affects your behavior. And its effect cuts across your whole system as a human being. Okay. Your cardiovascular system, meaning your heart. It affects your nervous system, your brain. It affects your respiratory system, the ability to breathe. It affects your gastrointestinal system, that is your tummy and all the organs necessary. So to help it make it easier, so when we talk about your body, right, a person who is under stress can have headaches, all right? Okay. So you realize that you constantly have headaches that you can't get rid of. You also begin to experience a lot of muscle aches, and joint pain. And you ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? You run all the tests and you're not finding the cause. You can begin to experience chest pain, all right? So you find somebody who's in a stressful relationship feeling, I'm sure that's where the thought of a heartbreak comes from. Okay. So you feel that pain in your chest, that discomfort in your chest. You can also begin to have a low sex drive. And this really affects a lot of marriages. When the husband or the wife, has a lot of stress from the workplace, it actually comes all the way home. Okay. So the person is unable to perform or, as it were, satisfy their partner or their spouse as they used to. And the worst part of stress is that it lowers your immune system. So you begin to fall sick more often than before. And I think that's really is a key thing. Now, when you come to its effect on the mind, the thoughts, you realize that people who are stressed have a low mood. They tend to be grumpy. They tend to get angry easily. Very irritable. And the worst of this is that they begin to feel anxious. There's a lot of anxiety. They're jittery. Right. They really lose control of their mind, as it were. And again, the aspect of depression. Okay. They become depressed, they become sad, a low mood, low affect. They are not motivated. All right. These are all the effects of stress on the mind. Now, again, behavior. So you find a person who used to go around people now withdrawing, staying at home, not really, socializing. You find them again eating a lot or under eating. You know, these are all people's responses to stress. And people who are probably were just social drinkers or social smokers, let's put it that way, now tend to actually indulge in heavy drinking, heavy smoking, taking drugs, or probably becoming even promiscuous. And it's all as a means they've adapted to deal with stress, and all of this really affects them. So stress not dealt with tends to affect the body, the person's health, can affect their relationships, and even generally their quality of life.
So, Doc, in Jeremiah's story that I made reference to earlier on, when he visited the hospital, it was revealed that he was suffering from chronic stress. Does that presuppose that there are different types or categories of stress?
Yes, I mean, from the clinical perspective, there are different types of stress. You know, otherwise we talk about environmental stress, probably economic stress and all these things. But from the clinical perspective, we can have positive stress like we discussed.
Right.
And then we have what we call acute stress. We have episodic acute stress, and we have chronic stress. I'll take these three categories of the negative form of stress.
Yeah.
So in acute stress, there's a stress that, as it were, it comes and goes. All right? So it does not linger on for long. So you have a fight with your spouse. I mean, the next day you're smiley and all in love again. And for instance, you go on a roller coaster. So the fright of it, you know, triggers a lot of, as it were, the stress hormones. But then short after the ride, everything goes down, everything's back to normal. So that's acute stress. Now we have the acute episodic stress. Now with this kind of stress, you're having those acute episodes of stress regularly, so that you don't actually get the opportunity to relax and recover. All right, so you'd have that in a lot of, you know, high pressure environments. You can have that in health workers, you know, because the back-to-back cases and the need to respond to things, it's really high pressure. So you have those episodic acute stress. Maybe occasionally short periods of breaks, but generally they're quite regular with not too much time to recover and to recuperate. Then we have the chronic stress. Now this is the long-term stress. This is a stress that is, I mean, just quite persistent. Okay, so it's for weeks, it's for months, and so the body hasn't had time to really relax at all.
Right.
All right. So you're talking about people who have, let's say, marital problems. You know, it protracts for months, even sometimes years. Your financial problems. You have probably some serious debt. All these kind of symptoms or types of stress that, you know, really protract can result in the wear and tear of your body.
So in Jeremiah's case, I mean, where sales kept dropping, and, you know, he wasn't able to meet targets and all those, giving him sleepless nights.
Right.
Typical of chronic stress.
Perfect of chronic stress. So you first of all have a high-performing, let's say, team member or staff. All right. And then suddenly you realize that things are beginning to change. Performance is dropping. Even his mood at work is, you know, has dropped. He's not socializing much. He's not talking much. You know, stress really drops your motivation. It makes you lose concentration. It really distracts you. It actually saps your energy. All right. So it's even the case that managers should be able to pick these things out and not make it look like the person is not performing anymore or is perhaps disinterested. But then a careful conversation with the person would elicit all these things, which would point to the fact that stress is the culprit. Now, obviously, there's the need to find out what is causing that stress. Is it a financial problem? Is it a health problem? Is it a relationship problem? And once you're able to solve the stressor, then the person gets better over a short period of time.
But I like to pick it from a certain angle. So how do we relate perfectionism with stress?
Right. You know, perfectionism is somebody who just wants to get it right. You know, he wants to get it on point. So perfectionism has a means or a way of causing stress.
Okay.
You know, because if things are not fully within your control of achieving that perfection, it will result in stress. So, but then once you do have all the cards on your table, you know, then you're able to get it perfect. So perfectionism really does predispose you to getting stressed. And I think I sometimes consider myself a perfectionist, so I'm very choosy about the things I do.
Right.
You know? So that's the one where I safeguard myself from stress, choosing the things that I do. And then I have it at the back of my mind that is, no matter how much I want it perfect, I mean, there's only so much you can do. So being a perfectionist, but being aware that you're a perfectionist and going easy on yourself, helps deal with the associated stress of perfectionism.
Great. I mean, that's so great. So then, what are some of the signs?
Right.
Yeah, what are some of the signs of stress that one can see, so that, I mean, in the work environment,
right,
in the family setting, once we see some of these signs, we're able to tell that perhaps a particular person is or may be getting into, some form of stress.
Probably getting into the zone of stress.
I know.
So it's really very important to pick it up, okay? Especially when it's, graduating into the place of chronic stress. So you'd find, first of all, the early things would be the mood changes, those behavioral changes, those, as it were, mind changes. This is a person whose emotions are all over the place, feelings are all over the place, but majorly on the behavior, the person begins to withdraw, okay? The person begins to, there's somebody who's close to you, begins to be eating a lot, or either not eating at all, rejecting food and all that stuff. You realize that this person used to be social, all right? So right now, the person is always at home, or come, let's meet. So you pick up those signs, okay? And in terms of behavior, you realize that the person that you knew who used to be bold, confident, is suddenly becoming quite anxious, quite jittery. You realize that he's always got a sad countenance, probably becoming depressed. So these things are things that you should be able to look at. From a clinical perspective, you can have somebody who starts complaining about the fact that I'm constantly having a headache. The next day, a headache. And this was something that was not previously there. So you pick it out from someone who their natural state as it were, and anything deviating from that natural state now complains of, diarrhea that is persistent, complaining of muscle aches and all that. And you find somebody who perhaps, tells you that I check my blood pressure, it's in the sky, I never have blood pressure. So these things can all be telltale signs of stress. It's easier to pick it from somebody who is close to you, because you know their normal state. So these are just the telltale signs of stress. Yeah.
But then, as an individual, are you able to, observe your own self and then tell that I may be tilting towards that zone of stress? So we've looked at how we can pick it up for other people, but how about the individual? So, somebody that's a bachelor, living alone, how does a person tell that I'm getting into that zone?
Right. So, with all the signs and symptoms that we've elaborated, the honest truth is that it's sometimes a little challenging to admit to yourself that you are stressed. We feel that we always need to be driven to accomplish the things that we accomplish. When we start experiencing those signs and symptoms, we actually really make excuses for them. That, probably I didn't have good sleep the day before, or something. We just make some excuse, but we never get to attribute it to stress. Okay. Now, it's very important to be able to pick it out, all right? Because obviously you don't want it to protract. So one thing is that some people also lose sleep. They're unable to have good sleep when they are stressed. So they lie in the bed. You realize that it takes hours before they sleep. And when they do sleep, they're just asleep for a short time. When you begin to also realize that you quite feel uncomfortable in yourself, you feel your heart beating all the time, you can sense the sensation of the heart, what we call palpitations. It is very important to then begin to question yourself, is everything okay? You go to work, you realize that you find it difficult to concentrate. You find it difficult to remember stuff. It could all be telltale signs, all right? When it gets to the point where you begin to withdraw, then it's really gone too far, basically. Right. You start experiencing headaches, and you realize it's headache after headache. So the next day you're feeling a headache, and little activity you're feeling a headache. These could all be signs of stress. And you see, sometimes we may get used to the stress. In other words, used to the busyness of the day, rushing to meet deadlines and all these things, that you feel that it may be you're just tired, that's why. Yes, you are tired, but then there's actually stress building up and causing all these things. So truly, we must be able to listen to our body, feel our body as it were, and if things do not feel right within our body, it actually could be a case of stress. Now, the interesting thing is that most of these people will actually run a whole battery of tests and everything comes out normal. Suspect stress in that case.
Right, right. So then, when a person walks into, say, the SYNLAB Clinic and is deemed to be suffering from stress, what you can walk us through what the detailed analysis would involve before you come to the point where you can actually say for a fact that a person is suffering from, say, chronic stress.
Right. So in deducing if somebody actually is suffering from chronic stress, really it's more like you have to go through a detailed history taking, as it were. It's very much conversational. Usually the person would come because they actually believe they're stressed. Some would come because they have a medical condition. Maybe they realize that they have hypertension and under normal circumstances they shouldn't have hypertension. They exercise, they do this and they do that. They probably don't have it in that family. Or they realize a change in their, that energy level. They realize a change in their interests, that they've lost interest in so many things. So something really bugs them and brings them. So the idea is to do a detailed history taking as to, finding out what could be the cause of that stress, or what is the stressor behind the change in, the mental status, that physical status, or that behavior. All right. So really, it's trying to fish out, what could be the cause. So it's a detailed medical history as to what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. Beyond taking the medical history, you're also going to do a detailed examination of the individual, checking the blood pressure, checking this, just making sure that everything is as it should be. So anything out of the ordinary could probably be a telltale factor.
Right.
But majorly it's in the person being able to explain what is going on in their lives, and especially explain how they are feeling. So the whole history is to elicit any of these things that could point us in the direction of stress. There are some tests that can be done to perhaps increase the suspicion of stress. So for instance, you'd ask the person, have they realized a drop in their sexual drive? All right. Have they lost interest in sex and all those things? So for instance, such a person, maybe the stress has resulted in what you call a decrease in testosterone, or perhaps even that alone can even be a trigger for stress, perhaps.
Right.
All right. So we'd usually run a testosterone test for the males. For the females, we'd look at the female hormones, estradiol. All right. We'll do other tests to look at cortisol.
Okay.
If cortisol in the blood system is raised, that could be a stressor or evidence of stress, and all that. So there are tests that you'd run. You'd want to also check the vitamin B12 levels, because when you have low vitamin B12 levels, it means that you have low energy levels. All right. Stress can, as it were, drop your energy and could affect the vitamin B12 levels. We check vitamin D. We could check also your magnesium. All these things help give us a picture, of stress.
I'm actually very interested in, the test part, because especially in certain settings, there are people that go to a medical facility, and irrespective of how good the interaction was with a doctor, if they were not made to do a test, they tend to think that, their visit wasn't complete,
right.
So you mentioned vitamin B12,
right.
Vitamin D, testosterone,
right.
estradiol, cortisol. All of those can give an indication.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As CMO of SYNLAB Ghana, I would imagine that definitely we have a product like that.
Yes. So we have set up what we call a stress and fatigue clinic. All right.
Okay.
One, stress, fatigue are related, and sometimes the chronic fatigue actually tells you that you probably have stress going on, and it's really a very common thing. I mean, the demands of life right now are ever increasing.
Okay.
All right, and as they're ever increasing, they're even becoming more difficult to solve. You know, so you have a lot of people actually living with chronic stress. We try so many different coping mechanisms, but then if they're not the right mechanisms, you eventually get to start breaking down. Your health begins to drop. Okay, so we, realizing this, have set up the stress and fatigue clinic. All right, where people can come in with the issue of stress or the issue of chronic fatigue. We would indeed take a detailed history, like I said, would support the history and the physical examination with laboratory investigations.
Right.
And then this would give us a picture of perhaps are there some vitamins that we need to replace? Are there some things we need to advise the person with based on the lab picture? But then the treatments of stress is really sometimes multidisciplinary. So you will need a physician to perhaps manage the hypertension that has developed, to perhaps manage the diabetes that has been complicated by the stress, to manage that heart problem that has been worsened by the stress. You'd also need a psychologist to help talk the person out of that person who's having relationship problems, that person who's having stress at the workplace because of bosses, not treating him or her well, or whatever the issue be, really a financial issue. You need a psychologist to probably just talk you through, okay, and give you the ways to go about it. And then you may need a dietitian.
Okay.
Somebody is now overeating because of the stress situation. Maybe the person, after seeing the psychologist, can now see the dietitian to help drop the weight. So it's really multidisciplinary, and it's a whole team that comes together. You may need somebody to even help you with your exercise, because exercise does have a good effect on lowering the stress the person is experiencing. Exercise again helps give that good feeling, it triggers that feel-good hormone within you, which really does do a lot of help. So at the SYNLAB Clinic, we put all these things together, make them readily available for that individual, and put them in and plug them in as and when needed to manage the health.
I'm sure we're going to come back to, the stress and fatigue clinic issue and delve deeper into it. But from your response to my earlier question, I realized that you were trying to give us some of the long-term effects of stress, hypertension. I mean, can you shed a bit more light?
So the thing about stress, is that one, it can actually cause, certain diseases.
Okay.
And again, it can also exacerbate any pre-existing diseases.
Okay.
All right. So you may have hypertension, it will worsen the hypertension. If you don't have it, it can actually cause the hypertension. Okay. If you have sorry about that. If you have diabetes, it can actually worsen your diabetes, throw it out of control. If you have any heart disease, stress puts pressure on the heart because it increases the blood pressure, it increases the heart rate, putting pressure on the heart. If you have any things like a stroke, it can worsen it. It can worsen your mental health issue. If you have anxiety, if you have depression, you become more anxious, more depressed. If you don't have it, it can actually trigger, anxiety, can trigger depression. So, in all these situations, if care is not taken, they would last or linger on forever. So yes, stress can cause certain chronic health conditions and can worsen any pre-existing health conditions.
Great. So about mental health, it's a very topical issue.
Right.
Obviously, stress does have an effect on a person's mental health. Perhaps, if you can shed a bit more light on that bit, the mental health, the relation, and the impact on a person's mental health.
Right. Julius, you'd agree with me that if things are not going well, a marital issue, or even just some impending shame, the stress of it can trigger so many things.
Sure.
So you begin to become anxious, anxiety, you feel apprehensive, your heart is always beating, the door opens and you jump, At the beginning, this can be dealt with if the stress ceases.
Okay.
The bank is chasing you, the loan sharks are chasing you to, pay back a huge loan that you can't pay, right? But then as soon as somebody gives you the money to pay it, stress disappears, all right? But in the presence of that chronic stress, it can result in anxiety, can result in depression. When these are not controlled, you can then have the unfortunate happenings, the person committing suicide. So we do not take stress for granted. And we really do acknowledge that stress can cause all these mental health issues, worsen them, and if care not taken, the worst can happen. So we find that even in students faced with the pressure of academics, or faced with the burden of excelling, can actually get into that place of anxiety, depression, and we've heard of cases of students actually taking their lives because things were just not going too well. So stress and mental health issues are directly correlated, and stress worsens any pre-existing mental health issue. So it's really necessary to be able to pick up any form of stresses that is worsening or causing a mental health issue and really deal with that stressor.
Thank you so much. Any coping mechanisms you want to share with us?
Right. Truth is, everybody faces stress, like I said.
Right.
The impact of the stress on the individual varies from person to person. One, sometimes because of that natural resilience, and two, certain coping mechanisms they have in place. But the first thing that everybody should do is to be able to keep a daily routine. Okay. The time you wake up, the time you probably get up to go to have your breakfast, your regular schedule as to the goals you've set for the day. So having a regular routine helps you feel in control. But then when you are buffeted and knocked left and right by different things that come, it creates stress. All right. The next thing is to have exercise as part of your daily routine. These are lifestyle changes. Just exercising sort of like sets the tone for your day, a positive mood and all that. All right. So exercise is key. All right. So exercise also helps release, some endorphins into the system. Endorphins are feel-good hormones that are quite good. Now, it's also necessary to get plenty of sleep. And there's something we call sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene means just getting the best sleep possible. So a neat room, quiet, lights off, no screen time from your phone and all that, sleeping at regular times. All these things help to have a very quality sleep, as you would say. So having this quality sleep, it helps relax your body, it helps rejuvenate your body, it helps revitalize you. Okay, so sleep is also known to be able to reverse the effects of stress, right? And obviously having good meals, eating healthy foods that have food that's made of fruits and vegetables, lean meat and healthy fats. All these things help, to cope very well with stress. And indeed, the aspect of socialization, having friends, having contact with people you can share your situation with and talking it out, all helps to cope and manage your stress very well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asamoah, for the insightful discussion that you had with us. Now, this brings us to the end of episode 1 of Health Chronicles. Stay tuned in for episode 2.